Andy.
I'm not. I'm sorry. I'm the worst.
That means we get extra credit.
Yeah.
I like that.
That wasn't a no.
All right. I'm ready now.
Okay, so we have chapter 1 on the classroom communication. So we had a communication question. When it comes to communicating with students, what skills do you believe are important for teachers to have? Does anyone have any ideas?
This is an interactive part of ours, so sorry. So if you have any ideas, please raise your hand, otherwise we will stare at you for a significant amount of time.
So like some ideas could be like a good listener or like empathetic or something that I think of when it comes to communicating in the classroom that teachers need to have.
Yeah.
I think just being understanding is a piece of it, being able to like fully commit to understanding where they're coming from and doing all the facts.
Yeah.
I think that teacher communication is very vital as well.
Okay, so these are the topics that we talked about today: classroom climate, teacher communication, and accommodating all students. Our thesis is up at the top. To communicate effective in one's classroom, one needs a healthy classroom climate, excellent classroom communication, and they need to be able to accommodate all types of students. So, order. When it comes to classroom climate, the first step to classroom communication, classroom communication in the classroom is the classroom climate. It should feel safe and comfortable for the students to encourage them to ask and answer questions, along with the teacher having to display many skills, but especially create a safe, friendly, and kind environment. For teacher communication, teachers are the most important part of the communication in the classroom. The teachers need to display all types of skills to be able to communicate with their students. When it comes to even like starting with the lectures, they need to be able to communicate so that the students can understand what they're talking about, but they also need to be able to communicate when it comes to like the feedback aspect, verbally and non-verbally, to give their students feedback so that they can learn from their mistakes or know what they did well effectively. And then the last part that they need to communicate is to offer support to their students when in need. A lot of times students will have needs outside of even the classroom that teachers need to know how to deal with and communicate in a way that's going to help their students. And then the last part is accommodating all students. There's three main types of students like that they talk about in the book, and that is the at-risk students, which are students that may have like behavioral issues, low motivation, lack of social skills, or plenty of others. There's the children that are considered gifted, and then there's also the children that are referred to as no, we talked about the at-risk. I lost it. Oh, like that have different needs, such as like ADHD, just anything that they may need special communication skills. And as a teacher, you need to be able to know how to communicate with all of these groups of people, which all have different communication needs.
So first is classroom climate. There's strategies for motivating students to learn, like having a supportive environment, like being there for all of your students. Meaningful learning objectives, like making sure you are teaching them something they can use outside the classroom or something they will remember for the rest of their lives. Then develop a program of success to set standards for the students to meet, and maybe like plaster posters around the room of standards like you want them to meet or what you stand for. Offer rewards for good performance. If they improve their test score from the previous test, maybe let them pick out of the prize box or have a piece of candy. If they are quiet in the hall, maybe marbles go into the jar. Incorporate game-like features. If you have a boring unit you are teaching, create a game out of it to make it fun, or have like a group project. Having students interact with others, make group work like presentations or projects. share answers to the homework like with their group members or just people around them. Having enthusiasm as a teacher, intensity, and ask questions. So always have a positive mindset when you're teaching and have fun. Motivate students to have their own motivation to learn. And then there's supportive climates. So description is a non-judgmental environment, like using you language. And like you are not doing your best means you're evaluate the student, so try and use I language like you are not doing as well as I think you can. I get frustrated, so that means you're like describing, you're evaluating the student, so that makes them feel like they're not targeted and maybe will make them like work harder. Problem orientation is instead of having a control attitude, like I know what's best for you, try using problem orientation, like we have a problem, what can you do to solve it? This allows the student to know that the teacher is there if they have any questions, but she is giving them the chance to solve it for themselves. Spontaneity is expressing freedom for deception, like having a clear ID and being completely honest, like just saying I didn't get my homework done instead of saying my dog ate my homework. Empathy is to express respect for the worth of the listener, to share feelings, to tell a problem, and accept emotional values. This means putting each other in each other's shoes. This shows to the student that we care about them on a personal level, and it doesn't mean that we agree with the student's feelings, just that we can respect them. Equality is the teacher and student have trust and respect for everyone, meaning to attach more importance on differences in talent, ability, worth, appearance, status, and power. And then provisionalism is being able to experiment with one's behavior, attitudes, and ideas. This means to problem solve rather than debate, and to investigate problems rather than taking sides. And to overall just have like a friendly and kind environment.
Sorry, we lost it. Sorry, continue, don't mind me. Okay, so I'm on teacher communication, so sorry. So they're like, obviously your teacher is gonna be like the biggest part in making the classroom comfortable and making you feel like you're able to communicate back to the teacher as a student. So as all of us are going to be, or most of us going to be future educators, you wanna make sure that you yourself are warm and welcoming and allowing students to communicate with you, whether it's a need in the classroom or just like a need outside of the classroom, because both are very important. I'm gonna cover kind of like 3 different things. So first is like teacher socialization as a whole. So there are multiple cultures that are like going on when you come into a new school district. The definition of a culture is like customs, social interactions in a particular nation, people, or social group. So your new school culture is when you come into a school or you come into a classroom, each one is gonna have different people who have different backgrounds, and they're gonna bring in different opinions and different ways to learn. And you have to be accommodating to that, and you also come in with your own background and customs that you want to incorporate as well into your own classroom culture. So you have a classroom culture, you might have a department culture, and you might also have a school culture. And while these hopefully are similar, they're also gonna be different because there are different people. So knowing when you come in to be accepting of all those cultures, with each other, and just that is always a good way to set yourself up to be friendly and open to everybody. Another thing is just like your culture, like your teaching style, your occupation style, what you want, whether you want to be the fun teacher that has like games all the time is learning, or you want to be the person who just sits down and does notes for the first half. Everybody has a different teaching style. That is part of your culture. Just kind of knowing what your teaching style is can definitely help you be more effective in your communication. And then when you're communicating with your students, there are kind of 2 ends of the spectrum, is like support and like supporting them to do an activity, and then feedback from the activity. So I'm gonna talk about types of support first. There's a lot of types of support, so every student is different, and you yourself might lean more towards types of support that you like better. So the first one is just listening, not offering any advice or any opinions, and just hearing what the student needs as they're communicating with you, and just being that like safe person that they can talk to is a great way to form a bond for more open communication. Another great way is emotional support, whether you need comfort or clarity, being that person is super helpful. Emotionally challenging is another type of support, knowing that you can push them further to look further into themselves, to really reflect on their values. Task appreciation, if they are doing a task, just saying like, hey, good job, like I really appreciate you trying, I really appreciate you getting out of your shell and doing it. That is a great type of support. At the same time, task challenge, you can be like, I know you can do better, I wish you could do, not even I wish you could do better, just like pushing them to challenge themselves further, emotionally and in activities that they do. There might also be like tangible support, like actual physical support that you're able to provide them, whether it's a jacket or a hat to go outside at recess, or it's your pencil or something that they just need in that moment that you're able to provide. And then also personal support, whether they have a bunch of stuff on their list and you're able to help them. If they have to stay in for recess because they need to do X, Y, and Z, if you can help them do X, then they can go outside faster. And that's a support that every kid likes recess. So they're really gonna be able to feel more comfortable and open with you and want to have that communication. The other type of communication is after an activity has been done and you're able to provide feedback. The biggest thing is make it your own. You want to own what you're saying. You want to say like, I appreciate this, I saw this. You want to use like first person pronouns. You also want to be specific, clear, and complete. You want them to understand what you are giving them feedback on, whether it's positive or negative feedback. They should know what the feedback is. Nonverbal is also important. If you are just saying like, I'm disappointed in you, but I'm disappointed in you, it definitely gives them mixed signals and they're not really sure which one to listen to, so make sure that your nonverbal and your verbal kind of go together. Be redundant. Make sure that you're repeating whatever it is, especially if it's a behavior that you want changed. You want to really stick with it and make sure that the message is clear. Also make sure that you know how your message is received, whether that's you asking them to repeat it back to you, whether that's if you're trying to teach and you want feedback on how you're teaching. Mostly those are quizzes and exams. That's feedback that you're getting from your students that's important. Your feedback should be helpful if you are giving them direct feedback. You can't just be like, I didn't like your outfit today. That doesn't help them. Your feedback should be like, hey, because you wore whatever, you weren't able to like participate or you kept fidgeting and that was distracting. But you also should be non-threatening in your feedback. You want everybody again to be like comfortable and emotional and allow them to come and talk to you and feel safe and that you're not targeting them. So you want to be descriptive rather than judgmental. You want to be specific times instead of just being like, you are loud. In class today, you took over the conversation. Like, you want to have specific times that you are able to be like, this was an issue or you did really well. And that way you're not just like assuming their character, but rather just the behavior. So those are all the types of feedback that are important.
Alright, so as most of us are all future educators in this room, as teachers, we are going to come across all sorts of different types of students. These students include students who are going to need accommodations and students who just need a little bit of extra attention. Some of these students will have disabilities that will affect their learning at schools. What is a disability? Well, according to the U.S. Department of Education, a disability is something that affects the knowledge and skills, any various neurodevelopment conditions that affect learning and use of specific academic skills. These skills include memory. Some students are unable to remember new information or lots of information at once. Some students also have visual and auditory discrimination, which means they're unable to see and hear differences in their everyday life. Some students also have visual and auditory association. This means that they are unable to associate visual and auditory stimuli, which stimuli is basically their tactiles, or their hearing and seeing. I'm gonna say this word, perceptual, I think this is it. Perceptual motor skills means that a student is unable to use the 5 senses with their motor skills and in their everyday lives. Spatial orientation, most of these students cannot use spatial or orientation skills, which means they cannot tell how far something is in front of them or something that is around them. It also includes verbal expression. These students are unable to express their ideas, unable to communicate, and are unable to request information. Sometimes these students are nonverbal, they don't say anything, and sometimes these students just don't know how to communicate. Some students also have closure generalization, which means they are unable to establish a set of data and information. Some students also have attending. Attending basically just means that they are unable to attend selectively and are unable to focus on certain tasks or maybe all tasks. Some of these students will not like to be defined as they have a disability. Some students don't consider themselves to be disabled. Some students like to consider themselves as just the way that they learn. There's nothing that really impacts them. They just have a different way of understanding information than everyone else around them, and that's okay. So it's important to understand that not everyone is classified as disabled. Gifted students. What are considered to be gifted students? According to the Davidson's Institution, gifted students demonstrate an advanced ability and potential in one or more specific subject areas when compared to other students the same age or in their environment. These students are usually advanced in thinking and comprehension. They are also emotionally intensified. They feel emotions very strongly. They also have a heightened sense of self-awareness. They usually know what's happening within their own body and their own feelings, and sometimes it's hard to actually tell for them because they're so self-aware. It's actually hard to tell in other people. They have a hard time reading other people. They also have a highly developed curiosity to learn, sometimes in more than one subject area and sometimes in just one specific area. They also have a great memory. They are very good at memorizing facts, spelling, really anything that they can put their mind to. They have a really great memory. They also have a high level of abstract thinking. They have large vocabularies and are able to express themselves in a mature style.
Not done?
Yeah, not done. Ways to help these students grow is to provide new books for them, create games and simulations to challenge creative thinking, and also provide opportunities and new challenges for these gifted students. So, the rehabilitation laws. So, the Rehabilitation Law Act of 1973 is basically laws for everyone, the public, the schools, colleges, businesses, for not discriminating against people who have disabilities. According to the U.S. Department of Education, the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 is a federal law designed to protect the rights of individuals with disabilities and programs that receive federal financial assistance. Now, for most of us educators, we're going into primary and secondary education, which is basically primary is elementary, secondary is middle school through high school. I'm assuming that most of us are going into these kind of schools right away, not to become professors. Now, in these types of schools, these programs are called an IEP, which means individualized education programs. They are an outline of special educations for each individual student from the school itself to help provide a plan of learning for these students. These are called accommodations. Now, these accommodations can be different for every student. It depends on what kind of disability they have. And it renews every year. When communicating with these types of students, it's important to think of some things while you're saying. I have some do's and do nots listed on the board. Do not assume that they cannot think or do anything for themselves. Do not force help upon these students. Do not avoid communication because you are unsure or are uncomfortable in certain situations with the student. It's listed in their IEP on what to do in those types of situations, so you should always read the IEP before assuming things. Also, never use words like handicapped, crippled, physically challenged, or victimized. We never want to use those words when associating with a student who needs accommodations. And never assume that a disability defines them as a human being. They are still a person, they still have emotions, and like I said, sometimes these students don't consider themselves to be disabled. Some do's when communicating with these students: assume they can do something unless it is stated otherwise. Most of the time, these students can do things for themselves unless it's written in their IEP that they cannot. If they refuse help, do not go ahead and do it. Sometimes, as educators, we just want to provide the best that we can, but sometimes students don't want. Sometimes these students do not want help. Let them communicate their needs when they want them and when they need them. It's important for us educators to understand that every student has their own individual needs, and we need to let them communicate them to us instead of assuming them. Also, treat them like a person. Again, they're a human being, they have feelings, and it's important to understand that they are a human being. Be a cheerleader for them. As teachers, be a cheerleader in their education and their personal lives. Help them grow. Set up realistic goals and expectations. If somebody has, for instance, like me, has dyslexia, do not expect them to go read a scholarly article. It is a very complicated type of reading. Have more expectational goals, like maybe reading a section in a chapter. And adapt new learning methods and have a wide range of materials for these students. By learning to adapt new teaching methods, maybe they can't learn in your type of teaching method. So it's important to have different types of methods for these students that they're able to learn from you. And also have a wide range of materials. Sometimes students with ADHD have a hard time focusing on certain things. I know at some schools they have like cushions or they have fidget spinners, something to help them focus without being off task.
Okay, so now we have just a little Q&A, just a little question from each of our sections. For the classroom climate, I have, what type of language is it good to use to make students feel as though they're not being targeted?
Use I statements instead of you.
Yeah. And then for the teacher communication in the classroom, what is a good way for a student to understand your message when giving feedback? This is a very open-ended, there's a lot of correct answers.
Did you say be redundant?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the biggest one, I feel like, in the section, was redundancy is a very good way to get students to get it in their head. But there's also a way to go too far with redundancy. For our last question, when communicating with students, what different needs, what are a few things you should and shouldn't do? Which is a very big one as well.
It's a very open-ended question.
Yeah.
Don't assume what they can and can't do unless stated otherwise.
I think that's our presentation. Oh, and then we have our sources.
We do have our sources. David's institution is a government institution, and then I have listed up here the federal laws and then the U.S. Department of Education.
And then
And the
our
book, yes, we have the book.
Any questions?